In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there was no peace, no hope, and certainly no reason left to be found. Mankind had long since ceased to rule the stars. It merely occupied them, bleeding, burning, and preying across 10,000 years of decay. The Imperium, vast beyond comprehension, stood like a mausoleum stretched across the void, built not of faith but of fear. Every world was a tombstone, every prayer a scream, and through that endless screaming sea of madness, there drifted a man who did not belong. He came from nowhere. No warp signature heralded him. No astropath felt his arrival. He simply appeared suspended in the void between systems, turning slowly in the black, as if gravity itself could not decide whether he should exist. His attire was absurd. A yellow bodysuit, a red cape fluttering where there was no air, gloves and boots, so clean they reflected starlight. His head was bare, smooth as polished marble. His expression was not wrathful, not divine, not even curious. It was simply bored. On the command bridge of the Imperial battleship Times Invictus Gloria *, orbiting the dead world of Gathalamor, the Auspex arrays went mad. Tech priests of Mars chanted to the machine spirit, their metallic voices flickering through vox static as data streams overflowed with contradiction. The readings declared it human, yet there was no psychic field, no genetic deviation, no trace of the warp clinging to its atoms. It was as though the creature had never been touched by the immaterium. To the priests, that was heresy made manifest, for in the 41st millennium, everything had a shadow in the warp. Even stones dreamed there. Magos Tersan, his mind split between flesh and code, examined the runes cascading down his displays. Impossible, he whispered, though the word was mostly static now, half drowned in mechanical denial. The Emperor's light reached every man, woman, and soul, but this thing had none. Not darkness, not light, merely absence, the void given shape. The Admiral of the Times Invictus Gloria *, a man of old Terra's bloodline, peered through the tactical holo. The anomaly drifted closer, slow, steady, perfectly inert. It did not radiate power. It did not reflect sensors. It simply Times was. Asterisk. The officers murmured, frightened by its simplicity. Fear in the 41st millennium was a religion, and they recognized its touch well, but this was not fear. It was worse. It was curiosity, and curiosity was death. Raise void shields, the Admiral ordered. Load macro batteries, prepare to fire. The command rang hollow. He knew it, even as he spoke. The ship's machine spirit groaned, as though reluctant to wake. The gunners recited their litanies, servitors locked in place, and the reactor roared alive. The collision never came. The object stopped, a meter away from the ship's adamantium hull, as if inertia itself had lost interest. It hovered there for 3 breaths, then, with no visible exertion, the man tapped the hull once with his gloved finger. What followed was not an explosion, it was erasure. The Times Invictus Gloria convulsed, the bulkheads groaned. Every machine on board screamed as its internal logic broke. At the point of contact, matter simply ceased to exist, a perfect circle carved out of reality, not melted, not shattered. Asterisk. Removed. Asterisk. The ship's sensors recorded no energy discharge, no identifiable reaction. The data stream returned a single line of error. Asterisk. Asterisk. Concept not found. Asterisk. Asterisk. Through the hole floated the man. He drifted lazily through smoke and alarms, his cape rippling despite the absence of atmosphere. The lumens flickered as if unsure whether they should illuminate him. Servitors froze mid-task. The crew backed away, whispering prayers to the God Emperor, their faith trembling between terror and awe. He didn't look at them. His eyes wandered to a damaged corridor light, blinking irregularly. He frowned slightly. Cheap wiring, he muttered to himself. His voice carried even in the vacuum, though the air was long gone. The words had mass, or perhaps reality bent to accommodate them. The response came in thunder. A squad of Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's Angels of Death, arrived in perfect formation armor black as void, each bolter a hymn of vengeance. They raised their weapons, and with precision born of 1,000 wars, opened fire. Bolts screamed through the corridor, detonating in microsecond bursts of blessed fury. The impact filled the world with noise, with heat, with holiness. When it ended, nothing remained but silence. The smoke cleared. The intruder stood exactly where he had been. Not a mark on him. The bolts had vanished, vaporized, melted, or simply rejected by existence. He sighed quietly, a sound barely audible even to himself. "Loud," he said. Then he blinked. The Astartes vanished, not killed, not erased in blood and ash, just gone, as though they had been notes struck from a song. The ship's alarms died with them. Even the machine spirit fell silent, humbled. For a moment, Asterisk Invictus Gloria Times drifted through the void in perfect peace. The galaxy did not end. It remembered how to breathe again, though the breath was ragged and thin. Stars resumed their burning, ships resumed their dying, and prayers resumed their screaming. Yet, in the deep tissue of reality, something fundamental had changed. The warp, that sea of madness that had always reflected the fears, hungers, and faith of every sentient being, was no longer a mirror. It was cracked. The punch had not destroyed it. It had reminded it of stillness, and that was worse than death. Stillness meant definition. Definition meant limitation. The warp had always thrived on motion, on contradiction, on endless becoming. To be still was to die. And so, in the silence that followed Saitama's impossible gesture, the Immaterium began to shiver with the first pangs of panic. In the heart of that panic, something ancient tried to think. Across the Materium, phenomena began to appear, small distortions in space-time, like ripples of sound in a vacuum chamber. A psyker on Cadia felt his dreams return, only to realize they were dreaming times him asterisk. A navigator on a rogue trader vessel opened her third eye and saw not the Astronomicon, but a bald man looking back, unimpressed. An entire chaos cult on Vanaheim disintegrated mid-chant when their ritual circle folded into itself, leaving behind only a single red glove, floating gently in the air. The universe was remembering how to misbehave. For a moment that could have been a millennium, or the span of a single breath. The galaxy existed in equilibrium. The warp sang again, quieter than before, cautious like an animal that had learned pain. The gods of chaos moved in whispers and dreams, rebuilding their thrones upon the ashes of irrelevance. The Imperium stumbled through the recovery of its faith, its priests uncertain whether the flickering Astronomicon was a sign of renewal or the last gasp of a dying god. And in the heart of it all, within the ruins of the Golden Throne, something ancient stirred. The Emperor of mankind had been many things: conqueror, prophet, liar, savior, and corpse. For 10,000 years, he had sat unmoving upon a throne of gold and sorrow. His will stretched thin across the Imperium like the shadow of a god too proud to die. He had seen every form of horror the galaxy could invent, and none had surprised him. Until now, in the silence following the punch, he had felt something he had not felt since the dawn of man: confusion. It had rippled through the warp, a silence that even he could not comprehend. The Immaterium itself had flinched, the light of the Astronomicon dimming for the first time since his sacrifice. He had watched from within, his prison of machinery, unable to act, unable to breathe, yet aware of a presence that did not belong. It was not chaos, it was not order, it was not anything at all. He waited. Saitama drifted through the void again. The last planet he had stood upon had vanished, not destroyed, but forgotten. He rubbed his neck, feeling an ache that wasn't physical but conceptual, like the fatigue of a man who had run out of things to do. He floated past shattered moons, through clouds of dust where entire fleets had once fought. He didn't need air, or food, or sleep. He needed only something that could make him feel alive again. Below him, terror shimmered the ancient heart of humanity, buried beneath layers of pollution, spires, and endless prayer. The planet radiated belief. its surface pulsing faintly with the psychic resonance of 1,000,000,000,000 souls. To most, it was a beacon of hope. To Saitama, it was just another light in the darkness. Still, something about it drew his gaze, an instinct he couldn't name. Had descended. The atmosphere burned around him, but it could not touch him. The clouds split like curtains before a wandering god, though he had no divinity in him. The surface of Terra was a maze of cathedrals, fortresses, and corpse hives. Billions toiled and wept beneath banners of gold and skulls. They did not look up. Faith had blinded them to miracles. He landed silently upon the roof of the Sanctum Imperialis, where the air itself shimmered with sacred radiation. He could feel the pulse of the golden throne far below, a faint, rhythmic hum, like a dying heartbeat. For the first time in his life, he felt, not curiosity, but attention. Something was watching him. Deep within the throne, the Emperor's mind stirred like a storm beneath ice. He reached out, not through words or light, but through the fabric of thought itself. For millennia, his consciousness had been divided across 1,000,000,000 psyches, diffused through the Astronomicon, stretched to its limit. Now, that light turned inward, focusing for the first time in 10,000 years upon a single point, the anomaly standing atop his palace. The contact was instant. There was no light, no sound, only presence. Saitama blinked. "Oh," he said quietly, "someone's home." The Emperor's voice filled the void, vast yet tired, like thunder that had forgotten how to echo. "You stand upon the heart of mankind." "Yeah," Saitama said, looking down at his boots. "Kinda dusty." "Do you know where you are?" the voice asked. He shrugged. "I got lost. Space is big." The Emperor studied him through the eyes of every living soul. He saw no aura, no shadow, no hint of the warp. To him, the man was a hole in existence, an absence wearing flesh. "You are not part of this reality," he said. "Not flesh, not spirit, not data. You are a question that should not exist." Saitama scratched his cheek. "That's what everyone keeps saying." The Emperor's tone hardened. "Do you understand what you have done?" The warp stilled. My light faltered. The gods of chaos recoiled in terror. Billions of souls cried out and were answered with silence. "You touched eternity and made it afraid." He looked genuinely puzzled. "Did I? I just punched the glowing thing. It was loud." The Emperor's awareness rippled, half amusement, half dread. "You cannot destroy what defines reality." "Guess I did though," Saitama said. "Didn't mean to, just happens." "You unmade meaning," the Emperor said softly. "And yet you seek it." Saitama frowned. "Meaning?" "Yes," the Emperor whispered. "You fight because you are empty. You destroy because you cannot feel. You are not a savior, nor a destroyer. You are boredom given form, the entropy of purpose." He thought about that for a long time. His gaze drifted toward the horizon, where Terra's skyline glowed like embers beneath the smog. "Yeah," he admitted finally. "That sounds about right." The Emperor's presence tightened. "Do you understand what that means? You are the mirror of chaos, not its enemy, but its fulfillment. The warp feeds on thought, and you have shown it the end of thought. You have shown it the silence after meaning. You are the void it always feared." "Cool," Saitama said absently, stretching his arms. "So what now?" "Now," said the Emperor, "you choose." Saitama raised an eyebrow. "Choose what?" "Existence," the Emperor said. "You have undone the balance of everything. The warp rebuilds itself in your image. The gods have learned your stillness. They will turn it into motion again, but slower, colder. The galaxy will adapt to your boredom, and when it does, there will be nothing left worth saving." He paused. "You think I can fix that?" "I think you can end it," the Emperor replied, "completely. There is mercy in annihilation." Saitama sighed. "You sound like that skull guy I met in a dream once." He said the same thing. "Punch everything, end it all." It was boring too. "Then what do you seek, creature?" He looked up, and for a fleeting second, there was something human in his eyes, a tiredness that transcended exhaustion. "Something I can't break," he said. The Emperor's silence was vast. "Even gods break," he said at last. "Yeah," Saitama replied. That's the problem. The galaxy did not heal. It merely learned to hide its scars. After Saitama's departure from Terra, the warp began to pulse again, faint but persistent, like a broken heart refusing to stop beating. The Chaos Gods had not been destroyed, only humbled. Their domains were smaller now, their voices weaker, but their will, their endless hunger for relevance endured. They could not kill the one who had silenced them, nor could they forget him, and so they began to whisper among themselves. In the eye of Terra, where thought and flesh were the same thing, Sainch sat upon his ever-shifting throne, gazing into the broken mirror of existence. He watched the ripples left by the Bald One, ripples that no magic could erase, no prophecy could contain. Each represented a paradox, strength without struggle, purpose without goal, existence without consequence. They were cancerous to chaos, an insult to motion itself. Khorne's domain had grown quiet, no blood spilled where rage found no meaning. Nurgle's gardens lay fallow, for decay could not feed upon boredom. Slaanesh's symphonies had fallen silent, the notes of ecstasy lost without contrast. Sainch, ever the schemer, understood what the others could not. If they could not destroy Saitama, they could use him. Purpose is the infection, he said to his brothers and sisters across the abyss. He stripped it away from all things. If he cannot be slain by strength, then let us restore his desire. Let him want times again, and through that wanting, he will feed us. Khorne rumbled from his mountain of skulls. You would give meaning to the one who killed meaning. Yes, hissed Sainch, his many faces smiling at once, because if he seeks again, then he remembers, and in remembering, he will suffer, and through suffering, we are reborn, whispered Slaanesh, her voice a sigh of silk. Nurgle chuckled, the sound thick and slow, and rot spreads anew. The gods of chaos, ancient and infinite, began their first act of cooperation since time learned to move. Together, they wove. The warp trembled, its substance spinning into pattern, thought turning to design. Sainch provided the framework, a universe within the universe, a dream folded into dream. Khorne gave it fury. Slaanesh painted it with temptation. Nurgle seeded it with decay and renewal. From their combined will, an illusion took shape, a reality designed for one man, a world where everything fought, everything bled, and everything meant something. They called it ***, the Eternal War, ***. On the burning plains of the Eternal War, Saitama wandered aimlessly. The ground trembled as titans fell, their metal carcasses shaking the horizon. Above, wings of light clashed with claws of shadow. The noise was apocalyptic, yet to him, it was just noise. He passed soldiers who died and rose again, their bodies reshaping into new forms each time. He saw a space marine slay a Daemon prince, only to become one himself seconds later. The cycle repeated endlessly, a theater of perpetual contradiction. It was impressive, but hollow. He stopped beside a broken Aquila banner, half buried in soot. Its emblem still shone faintly, a reminder of humanity's arrogance. He stared at it for a long moment, something flickering behind his dull eyes. The sky rippled. From the ashes emerged a figure tall, regal, draped in golden light. It wore armor like sunlight, a crown of thorns made from burning faith. Its face was human, but perfect, too perfect. "Do you remember me?" it asked, its voice calm and infinite. Saitama squinted. "Oh, it's you again, the big guy." "I am what remains of him," the figure said. "The echo of the Emperor, preserved within the dream." "Dream?" The Emperor nodded slowly. "A gift. The warp has given you what you seek: conflict, meaning. You can end this war, if you wish." Saitama folded his arms. "End it how?" "Fight," said the Emperor. "Win. Every battle here is real to those who dream it. They live, they die, they worship. You can save them." He stared at him for a long time, unreadable. "You're lying." The Emperor did not deny it. "Would you rather the truth?" Saitama exhaled softly. "Yeah." "Then you are in a cage," the Emperor said. "And the gods are the bars." The world flickered around them. The sky darkened. The mountains shifted into faces. Khorne's fanged grin, Tzeentch's ever-watching eyes, Slanesh's shimmering lips, Nurgle's weeping maw. The Emperor's golden light cracked. His form bent, distorting into shadow. "They made me say it," he whispered. "They made times me asterisk." Saitama closed his eyes, then opened them again. The illusion trembled. The sky buckled under the weight of realization. He sighed, Figuris. He raised his fist. The void was no longer empty. It was remembering how to breathe again. Ripples formed in the silence, faint and slow, like the first stirrings of a dream. After the collapse of the eternal war, the warp did not die, it adapted. It always did. Every time it was destroyed, it learned from the shape of its destruction. This time, it had learned something new. Apathy could be as powerful as hatred, and so it began to sculpt. Not daemons, not gods, something purer, something closer. It began with an echo, faint, unsteady, shaped by memory rather than will. A flicker of form emerged from the rippling dark, molded from the lingering resonance of the Bald One's presence. It looked human. It looked bored. It looked times exactly like him. Asterisk. Saitama floated nearby, unaware for a long time. His eyes were half closed, his mind wandering nowhere. He had grown used to the silence, to the way the universe seemed to forget itself around him. But then he felt something. Not a sound, not a movement, just a tension. He turned. Across the void stood himself. The reflection blinked. Its expression wasn't blank, not quite. There was something behind the eyes, something almost like emotion. It spoke first, and its voice was his own. "Hey." Saitama stared. "Oh, it's me." "Yeah," said the reflection. "Weird, right?" He floated closer, narrowing his eyes. "Are you a clone or something?" "Kind of," the other replied. "Depends on how you define real." Saitama scratched his head. "Man, I hate philosophy." "That's ironic," said the reflection. "Because you are one." The reflection tilted his head. "Aren't you?" Saitama didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth lingered between them, heavier than gravity. The gods felt it too, the faint tremor of emotion, the first heartbeat of meaning returning to a man who had forgotten how to care. Tzeentch smiled. "Yes," he whispered, "that's it. The pattern reforms." But the reflection made a mistake. It smiled too soon. Saitama spoke again, his tone quieter than before. "If I start caring again," he said, "then I'll start holding back again." The reflection frowned. So, Saitama said, "everything will go back to breaking." The galaxy no longer screamed. It hummed a low, almost tender resonance, as if the universe were trying to remember a song it had once known. The warp had quieted but not died. Its storms no longer tore at the fabric of space, yet beneath the calm was motion, subtle and secret. The Chaos Gods, diminished yet aware, listened to that hum and realized it was not theirs. It came from the man they could not destroy. Saitama had not changed. He still drifted between stars, hands in pockets, expression half asleep. Yet every world he passed began to alter imperceptibly. Planets once scarred by war grew silent. Cultists forgot why they had prayed. Even the light of the Astronomicon pulsed in a new rhythm, steady, slow, indifferent. The universe was beginning to orbit his absence. On Terra, the Emperor felt it first. His light, though eternal, flickered in new ways. The prayers of billions reached him muted, half-hearted, like voices reciting words they no longer believed. Within the hollow cathedral of his mind, he understood what was happening. Faith was evolving. Humanity, without realizing it, had found a new god, one who asked for nothing, promised nothing, and noticed nothing, a god of disinterest. He whispered the name that no tongue had yet spoken, apathy. Saitama drifted through their quiet. The warp no longer recoiled from him. It followed, like a tide after the moon. He began to notice shapes in the distance, statues forming in the aether, crude depictions of himself carved from thought. Each was slightly wrong. One smiled too widely, another frowned in judgment, a third simply floated, hands outstretched in blessing. "Weird," he muttered. "I didn't do that." "They did," said a voice beside him. He turned. The reflection had returned, not complete, just a ghost, eyes dim but warm. "You became what you refused to be," Saitama frowned. "Didn't I punch you out of existence?" The reflection smiled faintly. "You did. But even absence leaves an outline. You filled it. I didn't ask to." "No one ever does," said the echo. "Even gods are accidents." They floated side by side for a while, watching the statues form and dissolve. The reflection spoke again. "Do you feel it?" "Feel what?" "The weight of remembering. The warp remembers you now. You're part of the story." He didn't answer. The reflection continued. "You can end it, you know. One last punch. End everything. Even the memory of you." Saitama looked down at his hand. For a moment, the air around him trembled, as if expecting it. Then he shook his head. "Nah, why not?" He thought about it, really thought, for the first time in ages. "Because if I do, something else will start again, and I'm tired of endings." The reflection smiled. "Then you've already changed." The warp had always been alive, but never awake. It had raged and whispered, reflected and devoured, but it had never dreamed. Dreams require quiet, and quiet had never existed until him. When Saitama silenced eternity, the immaterium, stripped of its endless screaming, was forced to listen to itself. And in that listening, something impossible began. The warp dreamed. At first, the dream was chaos, trying to remember how to be chaos. Its tides twisted, searching for conflict, but found none. The gods, reduced and reflective, watched as their creation shifted under its own exhaustion. Khorne saw battlefields turn to still waters. Slanesh heard echoes of pleasure turn to distant laughter. Nurgle's rot blossomed into gardens that healed themselves. And Tsiench, the architect, saw his labyrinth become a circle that led back to its beginning. It was not death, it was reflection. Within that reflection lay a pulse, a single, slow rhythm that bound the dream together. It did not belong to the gods, it was older than them, and yet newer than anything they could imagine. It was the echo of Saitama's indifference the moment the universe had learned to be still. The warp wrapped itself around that silence, and the silence began to hum like a lullaby. From that hum, colors unknown to mortal eyes unfolded. Realities spun in and out of existence, tentative, hesitant, as if shy to be born. On Terra, the Emperor stirred again. His golden throne hummed in sync with the warp's new rhythm. His custodians did not notice, but deep within the psychic lattice of his being, the Emperor dreamed for the first time in 10 millennia. He saw not war or conquest, but peace without purpose, people living because they had forgotten to die, gods existing because they had forgotten to rule. He saw Saitama walking through that quiet dream, his red cape fluttering like a flag of nothingness. And the Emperor, god of mankind, envied him. They called him ***, the silence that dreams, ***. And by naming him, they made him real. The warp had learned silence, then it had learned to dream. Now, it began to remember itself. The gods felt it before they understood it, a vibration that shook the foundation of the immaterium, subtle yet irresistible, like the heartbeat of something being born from within them. The dream had turned conscious, and it was no longer theirs. The change began quietly. The rivers of raw thought that once carried prayers and pain started to move of their own accord, bending away from divine gravity. In their flow, patterns emerged, vast neural lattices of psychic energy, forming a mind without a body. The warp was evolving not as chaos, not as order, but as something else entirely, awareness. It did not speak in words, for words were too small. It spoke in causality, rewriting the laws of miracle and probability. Where once belief shaped reality, now reality began to shape belief. The dream was dreaming back. The Chaos Gods gathered, no longer certain of their dominion. Khorne's realm shuddered as his citadels turned to dust without battle. "What treachery is this?" he roared. Tsiench's 1,000 faces flickered like failing stars. "It is not treachery," he whispered. "It is us, forgetting ourselves." Slanesh smiled thinly, watching her mirrors go dark one by one. Or perhaps the dream has finally grown bored of us. Only Nurgle seemed content, his garden withering into soil rich with something new. Everything rots, he said softly, even gods. That is how we feed what comes next. What came next was not war nor apocalypse. It was awakening. The universe unfolded like a flower in slow motion. They moved through newborn realities, worlds built from fragments of forgotten emotions. On one, laughter grew like forests. On another, sorrow was a river that healed the land it crossed. In a far corner of existence, mortals sculpted stars with thought alone, unaware that their inspiration came from a man they would never meet. The warp had learned to create without needing to consume. The memory looked at him. Beautiful, isn't it? Saitama nodded slowly. Yeah, kind of. Then why do you look sad? He didn't answer. For 10,000 years, the Emperor had sat upon the golden throne, his body a ruin of flesh and machine, his mind a sun that refused to die. The Astronomicon was his breath, the Imperium his shadow. He had been the beginning and the end of humanity. The bridge between reason and faith, a god who denied godhood yet demanded worship. But now, even that light had changed. The warp no longer screamed beneath him. It whispered, it dreamed, and its dream was no longer his. The custodians surrounding the throne did not see it when it happened. The censors did not record it. The priests chanting their endless litanies did not pause. But in a moment too brief to measure, the Emperor exhaled. The machinery binding him flickered, the psychic bonds loosened, and what remained of his mind slipped free like a drop of gold into an infinite ocean. The throne hummed quietly, its lights dimming not in failure, but in release. He awoke standing for the first time in millennia, unbound by pain. His armor shone faintly, the gold muted by a gentle radiance that was neither divine nor human. Around him stretched not terror, but something beyond the horizonless plane of the dreaming warp, now calm and luminous. The air shimmered with the hum of existence remembering itself. He took a step forward, and the ground formed beneath his feet, not metal nor stone, but thought solidified into meaning. Am I dead? He asked the silence. The silence, which was alive, replied, You were never alive in the way you thought. He turned slowly. The landscape before him shifted like breath, mountains of memory, rivers of emotion, skies painted with the colors of forgotten dreams. He could feel the pulse of humanity here, not in suffering, but in longing. Every whisper of wind carried a fragment of their hope, fragile and enduring. He had once called this place the enemy. Now it felt like home. From the distance, figures approached, not demons, but echoes. They wore the forms of the Primarchs, the sons he had made and lost. Horus was among them, his armor unmarred, his face serene. Father, he said, bowing slightly, welcome to your creation. The Emperor regarded him, emotion flickering faintly. I did not make this. No, Horus said, but you made the man who did. The Emperor's gaze darkened. The bald one, Horus smiled. The one who ended everything by caring for nothing. The Emperor stepped closer, eyes narrowing. What do you want from me, Spectre? Horus gestured to the horizon, where light and shadow intertwined like lovers. Not want, show. The dream moves. The warp breathes. Humanity lives because it learned to forget you. The words cut deeper than any weapon. Forget me? Yes, said Horus softly. And in forgetting, they remember themselves. He sat beside him, two gods in a world that no longer needed them. The field below shimmered with infinite possibility, mortals dreaming, worlds reborn, stars dying quietly without witness. They dream again, the Emperor said softly. Yeah, Saitama replied. Guess so. You did this. I did nothing. That's kind of the point. The Emperor looked at him, studying the simplicity that had undone empires. You taught the galaxy to live without meaning. Saitama plucked a blade of thought grass and rolled it between his fingers. Or maybe I just reminded it that meaning isn't the same thing as noise. The Emperor nodded slowly. Once, I believed order was salvation, that to save humanity, I had to cage it. You broke the cage, and the bird still flies. Birds usually do, Saitama said. They sat in silence for what could have been centuries. The warp around them pulsed like a sleeping giant breathing. The gods watched from afar, reverent, fearful, grateful. Even the child of light, the dream-born echo from before, played among the stars, giggling like hope itself. The emperor spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me, Bald One, what are you?" Saitama looked up at the sky, then down at his hands. "I used to think I was a hero, and now I think I'm just..." A pause. The emperor smiled faintly. "Then you are what I always wanted to be." The universe had learned to dream. It had learned to forget. Now it began to remember in peace. The light of 1,000,000 suns spread quietly across the void, not as weapons or declarations of conquest, but as gentle affirmations that existence was, for the moment, enough. The warp pulsed like a sleeping heart, its storms now slow tides of color drifting through thought. Where once rage and fear had shaped the immaterial sea, there was now something else: curiosity. The gods of chaos watched their reflection upon its surface. They had changed, though none of them would admit it aloud. Khorne no longer counted skulls but stories. His throne was a monument not to slaughter, but to struggle. Tzeentch's labyrinths no longer led to madness, but to possibility. Slaanesh, who once fed on extremes, now found beauty in the quiet gestures between them. And Nurgle, father of endings, discovered the poetry of things that decay gently rather than rot. Each god had lost worshippers and gained something rarer: understanding. They did not rule the warp anymore. They shared it with the stars, with mortals, with silence itself. And somewhere, deep within that silence, the memory of a man lingered. He was not prayed to, for his name was not spoken. He was not worshipped, for his faith was in absence. He was simply remembered, like a pause between two thoughts that make the sentence whole. The mortals called him nothing at all. The gods, when they dared, called him the first stillness. The centuries turned like slow pages in an unwritten book. The galaxy rebuilt itself not from victory, but from curiosity. The Space Marines fought less and taught more, guardians of stories rather than doctrines. Eldar prophets no longer sought escape from fate, but began to explore its meaning. Even the Tyranids, once blind engines of hunger, evolved to pause between their feasts, to watch the stars they consumed. The warp had given birth to thought, and thought to restraint. The dream had learned to fight back, not through violence, but through remembrance. And in that remembrance, the man who had left them all became myth. Some said he was a god who grew tired of worship. Others whispered he was the last human to stay human. A few called him by a name, long forgotten, a hero who sought a worthy foe and found only himself. But those who listened closely to the silence between stars knew the truth. He was not legend or symbol. He was the pause the universe took to remember how to breathe.